Alright guys, this is a brief tutorial to go along with the B16 assignment, digital device, how a digital device works, rather, data flowchart diagram. So what we're doing here is taking some of those pieces that we talked about in B16, some of those internal parts here, and then we're kind of pairing them or setting them up with the input and output devices that we've talked about in earlier tech concepts, as well as some digital storage devices, and kind of making a big picture flowchart diagram here of how a computer basically works and how it works with data. Now you notice I have the kind of the motherboard here in the background, just to kind of, the motherboard is that piece that brings everything together, so I just kind of put that in the background. But the goal here, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to take these pieces, and before I say anything else, you don't have to turn these pieces or anything else, you just have to move them. But take these pieces and organize them into a diagram that explains how data moves from input to processing to output, and then how the processor also draws on stored data. We're making a flowchart diagram that demonstrates how all that works. Okay, so what I want you to try to do is take these pieces, take a look at them, and see if you can come up with a way to build a flowchart that explains it. Now, I know a lot of you don't have experience with this. That's okay. But I think you might be able to figure it out by using some context clues here, by reading the the arrows and the information inside of these big arrows that we have. The arrows are significant because they represent the flow of information or data, digital data, on your digital device. Okay, and of course this happens at a very fast pace on a digital device. So to get started, my recommendation to get started is to simply take the input devices rather, and their label here, put them on one side of the page, and then put the output device examples title on the other side of the page. Okay, like so. And then what I would do is I'd take a look and see if you can figure out where the input and output devices are. Now I'll give you a little hint. There's three of them. I'm not going to show all three of them to you. I'm going to have you kind of draw on your prior knowledge of things we've talked about. But we just want to put them in a row on each side, or I should say in a column on each side. So I know that is an input device rather. A mouse is an input device. And then I know that speakers are an output device. So I would start there. I would go ahead and just put them in a column here. And then take a look at what's left there and see if you can figure out how you would go about laying out this flow chart. All right, there's probably what, a dozen pieces here or so of things, but see if you can come up with it. All right, we're going to pause the video now, or I want you to pause your video here for a moment, and then try that, and then I'll show you what it should look like here in just a minute, after you get a chance to kind of come up with your own. Okay, so let's go ahead and pause the video now, and then we'll come back together and talk about it. Alright guys, so here's where we started with. This is what we talked about here before you went through and tried to come up with your puzzle, if you will, of your flowchart diagram. Okay. Now this is what hopefully you came up with, and if you didn't, that's okay. You can move them around. I know a lot of you don't have experience with this, but sometimes it's kind of interesting to try to figure this out on your own and think about what's being written here. Okay, but this is what we're kind of looking for here. This is the design we should come up with, or something like this, and we may have not laid out exactly like mine. But this is what it should look like here. Alright, you can see that I have all these input devices here. This is a microphone, a mouse, of course, and a keyboard for input devices. And the output devices are over here. But this is all the stuff that happens inside of your digital device. Okay, so you can see here, for example, here's the input devices sending data in the form of commands, so typed commands or mouse movements, voice commands, whatever, to our central processor. Okay, now our processor is linked with that RAM, because remember the RAM helps the processor handle larger chunks of data at one time. As the processor gets commands, it has to check with storage devices here to get data that it needs to help it execute those commands. Okay, so for example here, if you want the computer to run a certain program. Maybe you have a game on your computer, or maybe you want to type up a letter or something, or another word processing document, or you want to access the internet. You'll have to go to the storage device to do that. Okay, now we don't have the internet represented on here, but that would be another input and output on here. We've kind of diagrammed that in a different diagram earlier in the year, but right now we're just kind of talking about the computer itself or the digital device itself and how it works. So anyway, so the CPU accesses information, draws information to help it execute those input commands, and then also at times it will send things back to the storage device for saving. Now you notice I have, we can do that with this DVD-ROM, a burner, DVD burner. Sometimes we would do that with. A lot of times it happens with our internal hard drive, which is right here. And then sometimes it can be done with a hard drive that's external, in this case a portable drive as we labeled it here in class. So it's kind of a two-way street here as far as accessing data and then saving data for certain commands. So again, if you're typing out a letter and you want it saved, okay, input would tell it, you'd click on the save button with your mouse, and then the CPU would save that data to whatever device you told it to send it to. Okay? And at the same time here, what we got going on is we have CPU sends out data, okay, digital data. That's what we call them, output devices, okay, to whatever it needs to send it to. So if it's playing music, of course, it's going to send output to the speakers or headset if you have them on. The CPU is constantly sending output to the monitor. Okay, and that's why we have to have a video card a lot of times. You notice here it talks about a video card. I didn't put that on here. We didn't have enough room, but we have that separate video card that we sometimes use to help us with that. And then once in a while, whenever we print, we may have to send output to our printer. Okay, and we have other output devices as well, but those are just some examples. Okay, so input from our input devices to the processor. Processor takes the data it needs from the storage, and then it sends the digital data out to the various output devices that are hooked up to it. Okay? Just a reminder again that even though this is an example of a computer, this is the same for your Chromebooks, it's the same for your cell phone, it's the same for your iPod touches or tablets. It's the same for just about every digital device. The parts look different, of course, okay? And what input and output devices you have available may look different or are different, but the concept is the same no matter what digital device you're talking about. Thanks for listening to this. I hope you have a little bit clearer picture of how data moves through a digital device.